Hello and welcome to the East Central Regional Arts Council's grant information session for artists. Let's see, my name is Katina. I'm the grant program officer for the East Central Regional Arts Council. I'm recording this grant information session for anyone who's unable to join me for an in-person grant info session, or sometimes I host them via Zoom. If you prefer that method, you are welcome to register for a Zoom, one of our grant workshops online. I usually have them on our calendar, and through this grant workshop, I'll show you some stuff on our website and where you can find a few things a little bit later on. Or if you do prefer to have a one-on-one grant info session with me, I'm happy to schedule those at any time. So just so you know, you are welcome to listen to this recording. But if you have questions about anything that I'm sharing today, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to answer questions for you, or more questions, or how it might pertain to a particular project that you might have in mind. So with that said, I'm just going to get started. Our grant information session agenda today includes an overview of the arts funding system within the state of Minnesota. I'm going to talk a little bit about the ECRAC programming and basically who we are and what we do. I'll specifically go into details about the grants that are available to artists who are living in our region, and cover a little bit of grant basics, some things to know if you're filling out a grant application with us. Again, if you do have questions as I'm talking through some of these things, feel free to send me an email or give me a call. My contact information will be part of the presentation here at the end as well, where you can always find my information on our website at ecrac.org. So first of all, the arts system within the state of Minnesota is pretty incredible. Any artist throughout the state of Minnesota can apply for funding with a regional arts council. There are 11 regional arts councils across the state. We are Region 7E, the East Central Regional Arts Council. We cover artists and arts organizations in the counties of Chisago, Isanti, Kanabec, Mille Lacs, and Pine. So if you are a resident of one of those 5 counties, you may be eligible to apply for a grant with ECRAC. When I say ECRAC too, I should say the East Central Regional Arts Council, that's our acronym, ECRAC. So we'll switch back and forth between saying ECRAC or the Regional Arts Council. So there is also a Minnesota State Arts Board, and they cover artists who live throughout the entire state. So they are another organization that you may have as a resource or a tool for grant funding, and you're welcome to check out their website. They're a partner of ours, but we are not part of the Minnesota State Arts Board. So you'll see here, I should say, our region is this, where the arrow is pointing, East Central Minnesota. Right, a little bit about our funding. Where do we get our funds to fund our grant programs? So the McKnight Foundation generously funds our artist grants. So we have 2 grants that our McKnight funds go towards: the Mid-Career Artist Grant and our Essential Artist Award. And I'll talk more about these as we move through the grant workshop. We're also funded through the state of Minnesota's general fund. This fund funds our Art in Our Schools grant. It funds the Small Art Project grant, and it funds our scholarships for K-12 students. These are mainly organization grants. If you are with an organization and you are working on an art project for them, they may be an eligible applicant, and that's a separate grant workshop that I do for organizations who are eligible to apply for those grants. I'm going to focus on our individual artist grants in this grant workshop. Other than the K-12 student scholarship, if you know of a student living in our region that is in the arts, music, dance, theater, visual arts, they may be eligible to apply for our student scholarship. And then the third fund is the State of Minnesota's Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, or ACHF fund, or Legacy Dollars. Those all are referring to the same fund. We have a grant. This funding goes towards our Arts and Cultural Heritage Grant Fund for organizations, and we have an Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund grant for individual artists, and we also have an Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund Resiliency Grant that is for artists and art organization. So again, I'm going to talk more about these grant programs as we move forward. Okay. A little bit about the legacy dollars. On November 4th, 2008, voters of Minnesota approved a 25-year arts legacy for the state of Minnesota. So if you're not familiar, you may have heard of or you've seen this logo before. This is the Clean Water Land and Legacy Amendment. Minnesotans, they resoundingly passed the Clean Water Land and Legacy Amendment to the state constitution. So as a result, over a 25-year period, 3/8 of 1% of the state sales tax are dedicated as a third to the Clean Water Fund, a third to Outdoor Heritage Fund, and then the final third is broken into two parts. There's 14.25% to Parks and Trails, and then the remaining 19.75 goes to the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Now, the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund or legacy dollars are not just funding the our Arts Council. They fund all 11 regional arts councils across the state. The funding goes to the Minnesota State Arts Board as well. It also goes to public television, public radio, zoos, libraries. If you're interested in where the funding is going, feel free to visit this website, www.legacy.leg.mn, and you can find out where all of this funding is being dedicated. Okay, a little bit more about us as an organization. The East Central Regional Arts Council has been around since 1979. Originally, we were part of the East Central Regional Development Commission that was located in Mora. And if you've been an artist in this region for a long time, you may remember at that time. In 2010, after working with consultants and input from constituents, the decision was made that the Arts Council would leave the Regional Development Commission and they became a new designated Regional Arts Council. As an independent nonprofit in July of 2011, they located their offices to Bram. And then in 2020, we've recently, I say recently, but it's been 4 years since we moved to our new location in Hinckley, Minnesota. We are located, if you're familiar with the area, we're located near Toby's, south of that building. And you're welcome to come visit us here. The East Central Regional Arts Council's mission is to support the arts and bring the life-enhancing values they afford to Region 7E residents. We accomplish this mission through programs and special initiatives for artists and arts organizations. So in other words, we are here to increase the arts. I like to say that if there's an art project happening in our region, it's possible there is grant funding available to help pay for that art project. The vision statement includes that all Region 7E residents will have the opportunity to participate, appreciate, create, and invest in the arts. Our values include arts in action. We're motivated by our love of the arts to serve artists and organizations with resources, education, and commitment. We welcome all artists and organizations as partners in our common goal of developing a vibrant arts community. Integrity. We recognize all art forms and act with consistency, support, and respect in all our relationships and in our stewardship of the resources entrusted to us. Artistic merit. We uphold a high standard of artistic quality that promotes growth and development of creative knowledge, skills, and understanding. And legacy. We understand and appreciate that the arts are an essential part of our heritage and daily lives. We uphold the creative spirit from the past, in the present, and into the future. Some of the, so ECRAC provides grants to artists. We also have arts and other nonprofit organizations can apply for grants, including educational institutions and local units of government. We provide technical assistance, and I'll talk more about that later. We have workshops, which you are participating in a grant info session right now, a form of workshop. And we have referral services to arts organizations and other artists for things that maybe we don't have the resources for, but we know of other organizations that do. So if you have an arts related question, even if I'm not able to help you specifically, I may be able to direct you to an organization that would be a great resource. We also coordinate the arts regional needs assessment and the subsequent arts plan for the region. So every biennial, we do survey people in our region. We ask you as artists and our arts organizations if we're serving you through our grant programs. And if there's any advice or things that you would like to see us doing, don't hesitate to let us know. Our board members currently include Pat Black of Pine County, Matt Krause of Chisago County, Roger Niebauer of Kanabec County, Deb Trent of Pine County, and Carla Vita of Mille Lacs County. We do have vacancies, and if you happen to be interested or know someone who would be a great fit for a board member, let them know that we would be interested in talking to them. We try to have at least 2 board members from each county. So having 5 now, we would like to have 10. So another thing to keep in mind, if you happen to know any of these board members, you want to make sure that you are not advocating any of them for your grant project that does make your project ineligible. Also, if you do know a board member, if they know you and how you have a relationship, there is most likely they will declare a conflict of interest and will not participate in reviewing your grant application, which is totally normal. Okay, what programs? Here's some programs. I'm going to just run through the list of programs. I will dive deeper into each of these as we're going forward, but just as an overview of the grants programming that ECRAC has available to artists, I'll start with the Mid-Career Artist Grant. This is a $3,600 grant. We have 3 deadlines per fiscal year. Starting in October. So October 1st deadline, a February 1st deadline, and then April 1st deadline. At those 3 deadlines, you're able to apply for the Mid-Career Artist Grant if you are eligible for that grant. We have an Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund grant for individual artists. This is a $2,000 grant. Again, it has these same 3 deadlines. We also offer an Essential Artist Award. This is our $9,000 grant. We have 2 of these available. It has 1 deadline per year of March 1st. And we have an Arts and Cultural Heritage Resiliency Grant. This is a $600 grant that's fairly new to our organization. This has an ongoing deadline. So artists are able to apply for the $600 grant at any time. And there's around a 2 to 3 week turnover for from when you apply to when the grant funding could be available to you. And then we have their scholarship for K through 12 students. This is a $599 scholarship. And again, has just the 1 deadline per year of March 1st. All right, some of the other things that we offer include, we have an Essential Arts e-newsletter. So if you're not registered for our newsletter, you can register for that newsletter by emailing us, or you can sign up for the newsletter online on our website. We send newsletters maybe once a month, every other month. Mainly we send out newsletters when we have information to share. When a grant program is open for applying, or when we have the Image Art Show coming up, we let people know about that. So that's something else that's really exciting for artists in our region, is the Image Art Show. And hopefully you would be interested in participating. So and I'm getting off topic. Okay, so back to the workshop. We have an art gallery space where we actually hold a permanent collection of artwork. We have a resource information page on our website and here at the office. We have economic development information. We have an arts library. We offer workshops for artists and organizations, grant information sessions, grant writing technical assistance. This is one of my favorite services that we host, and one that I work with you. The grant writing technical assistance is for anyone applying for our grants, can reach out to myself as the grant program officer with questions about the grant application itself. If you're having any trouble with the application, technically, I can assist you with that. But also, if you are working on an application draft and you would like a review of your application before you submit it, I am open to reading your application, giving you feedback, letting sure all of your attachments to the application open properly and that we can see them on our end. I look over your budget and just let you know if there's anything that might be missing or ways that you might be able to improve your application. So yeah, that is our grant writing technical assistance. We have art show display equipment rental. So if you are having an art show somewhere and you need standards or stands or something like that, we do have those that you can rent from us. So if that's something you're interested in, just reach out to us. We also host the annual Image Art Show, which I kind of already mentioned earlier. So we do that once a year. And this Image Art Show is open to all visual artists who live in our region. You can enter one piece of artwork. It's not juried, but it is a judged show. So we do offer awards for that show. And we have a page dedicated to the image art show on our website. So I'll show you where that is when I take you later on into the website. We have space for meetings and arts events here at our office in our gallery space. And we have a past approved grant application library. So if you are someone who if you learn better by looking at maybe someone's approved application, you're welcome to make an appointment. You can come into the office and take a look at some of those past grants that have been approved and were successful projects. I also offer remote office hours. I am available to travel, so I can meet people here at our office space, but I'm also open to meeting artists and arts organizations about our grant systems and grant programs, excuse me, throughout the region. And then we have referrals to other services. Like I said, if we aren't able to help you with a grant, possibly there's another organization that that might be able to assist you. Okay, so another thing I also like to throw in this slide, just to keep in mind that maybe a grant isn't the perfect fit for your project, and that's okay. Some things to keep in mind is our grant, it is a lot of paperwork. It takes a lot of time to plan and have everything ready for your grant application. It isn't free money, and there is a possibility of public scrutiny. You have to track all of your expenses for a project if your project is approved, and there's a final report. So it's worth considering that there may be other sources of funding that might fit your project better. Of course, I want you to apply for a grant with us. If we are a good fit for your project, I am happy to help you with a grant application. Okay, so what else is new? We have increased our grant amounts. Makes sense with the economy that we're in, that we would increase our grant funding amounts. So that's exciting. We have the resiliency grant now. This is a grant that was created because in response to COVID, and it is a quick turnaround grant. It is small, but hopefully is helpful to people who need it. We have remote office hours. We didn't used to offer that. We have ECRAC gallery space is now available for artists and organizations for meetings and events, other arts events. So if you are interested in having an art show and you'd like to use our space, we can certainly talk about that and how that could work. We highly recommend for organizations that don't have board members here in our region that they have an advisory committee member located in our region. So that is something that isn't important for individual artist grants, but if you were to be working with an organization, that is something new for that. We always are updating our grant guidelines and grant review criteria based on feedback and needs of our organization and our community. So that happens every biennium that we're looking at the grant guidelines and our applications and the review criteria. Work samples, this is something that we require our organizations to include. We always require artists to include work samples, but we've also added it now to our organization applications. And we have a revised budget template. We're just trying to always do things to make things hopefully easier for people to apply for a grant application. So, all right, another thing I just want to throw out there that I know you put a lot of time into applying for a grant with us. And if you happen to not get funded the first time you apply, I really hope you'll consider reapplying. I know our board always gives suggestions, and our grant reviewers always give suggestions for what you can do to improve your application and reapply. So if you're not funded, please try again. It's not personal. It may feel personal, but it's not personal. And sometimes it's because we ran out of grant funds. That does happen occasionally. We award more grants, as many grants as we have the funds for. And if we get more applications than what we can fund, unfortunately, there are a few applications then that we aren't able to fund. But every fiscal year we get our new funding. So always helpful to try again. Let's see. Let's get into what makes you an eligible applicant to apply for our grants. First of all, you do have to be a permanent resident located in Region 7E for at least 6 months. So if you are funded, if your application is approved, we do require you to submit a copy of your driver's license or other proof of residency. You must be applying as an individual artist, not for a collaboration or to benefit a group or an organization. An example here would be, we don't fund artists under the arts arts applications. We don't fund for you to teach others or to design a teaching program. That is something that organizations can apply for. So an organization can apply for a grant to bring you in as a teaching artist. So that's something to consider. There is a possibility to do that type of project, but just not with the individual artist grant. You must be a U.S. citizen or permanent resident alien status. You must be at least 18 years of age. If you are not 18 years of age, you are possibly eligible then for our student scholarship. If you are applying for a grant that's funded through the McKnight Foundation, you are able to receive a McKnight funded grant once in every 2 years. So for example, if you were to apply this fiscal year for a McKnight funded grant, which would be our mid-career artist grant, for example, and you are funded this year for that mid-career artist grant, you would not be able to apply or would be eligible then for another mid-career artist grant until fiscal year 2027. Right now we're in fiscal year 25. And so in fiscal year 26, in the in-between year, you could apply for our Arts and Cultural Heritage Grant, for example, so that you could still receive a grant from us once per fiscal year. And if you have questions about how that works, I'm happy to answer more questions later. The individual artists, you're now allowed only one grant at a time. So you can have one full grant with us, a mid-career artist grant or an arts and cultural heritage grant or an essential artist award at one time. The exception to this is that we do allow you to also have a resiliency grant in addition to one of our larger grants. Any events that you have as part of your project must be open and accessible to the general public. And if you are applying for an arts and cultural heritage grant, it is a requirement that you have an open to the public event as part of your project. And I will talk more about that. You must not have any unacceptable or outstanding reports due to ECRAC. That just means if you've had a grant with us before, if you've never submitted your final report for that grant, you're not eligible to apply again until we have that final report submitted and approved. And you also must not have any misuse of funds determination with the Minnesota State Arts Board or another regional arts council across the state. Okay, so before you begin, excuse me, I'm just going to readjust and get comfortable. Okay, so before you begin, make sure you're an eligible applicant. If you have any questions about your eligibility, feel free to reach out and I'm happy to answer some of those questions to make sure you're an eligible applicant. Make sure your project is an art project. We can only fund arts projects. Later on, I'm going to show you a list of art forms that we're able to fund. It is quite an extensive list, so hopefully there'll be something that your project will fall under. Have a planning team and brainstorm different ideas and feel free to reach out to me if you have a project or an idea in mind that you're wondering if it would fit into one of our grant programs. I'm happy to talk you through that and maybe guide you to which grant application might be a better fit, one over the other. You can always give us a call as well before you apply, just to make sure we do have funds available. Like I mentioned earlier, we can run out of grant funds. And if we get to that point, we won't be able to fund any additional grant applicants in a particular grant program. So I always encourage anyone applying for a grant with us to read the grant guidelines and the instructions thoroughly. So we have a section in our grant guidelines of things that we cannot fund. If any part of your project falls under that category, I highly advise giving me a call and we can talk through any questions about the list of what we can't fund and maybe discuss ways to make your project eligible. Once you are ready to apply, you want to create an online grant login in our grant portal. So you create a login with your email address and password. You'll answer a series of questions to set up your login for our grant portal. And once you have that login and password information, that's your login and password for our grant portal for as long as you want it to be. Any applications that you create or applications that get funded, so grants that you have live in your grant portal and they'll live on your dashboard, so you can see that past grant history of yours. Your final reports are all there in our grant portal on your grant dashboard. So we have our website, which is ECRAC.org, and then we have the grant portal. So there's two websites where if you are seeking a grant funding from us, you'll access the grant portal through our website. And I mentioned this before, but I am going to share my screen and show you on our website where you can find some of that stuff. If you haven't, maybe you've already looked around our website and you've seen some of it, but I'd like to point out some of those spots, key spots that'll be helpful as you're working on an application. Okay, what is an artist and am I an artist? Hopefully you feel that you are already an artist, but we do like to just say that art is so many things. We consider it the study of a creative skill, the process of using a creative skill, the product of the creative skill, or even the audience's experience with that creative skill. The Minnesota State Arts Board and the Regional Arts Councils define arts very inclusively. They're activities resulting in the artistic creation or artistic performance of works of the imagination. So we do, these activities do include disciplines that are followed and defined by the National Endowment for the Arts. So you do just want to make sure that you are applying for an art project, as I mentioned before. If we are talking about a project that you are asking whether it's eligible, and I'm questioning it, whether it's an art project, it may not be a good fit for our grant programs. But here is a list of all of the eligible arts forms that you can apply for with a grant with us. So there's dance, there's music, there's opera, musical theater, regular theater, visual arts, design arts, crafts, photography, media arts, literature, interdisciplinary, there's folk life and traditional arts, cultural, humanities, there's multidisciplinary where you can combine more than one of these art forms together. It is very extensive. And each has a subcategory, of course. So let's get into some grant writing basics. This is some information that'll be helpful as you're working on a grant application with us. First of all, where do you find it? ECRAC.org. If you go to our website, you will find a lot of information, everything you need to know about our grant programs. Hopefully everything you need to know anyways. You can, when you're working on a grant application, I always say, make sure you have all of the items that the grant application is asking for. You want to complete a completed application. You want all of your file uploads in the correct format when you submit your application. One example of this that I'll advise any of you artists who are using a Mac computer, for sure, our grant applications are not compatible with Mac files. So you want to convert all of your uploads into a PDF. That would be the best way. Mac files, it does allow you to upload one, but we can't open it when we're looking at your application. So that's just one piece of advice if you use a Mac computer to consider converting to a Mac file. What else do we have here? Okay. Know how your project fits the grant program criteria in the guidelines. I'm going to walk you through the grant program criteria and what your application will be scored on to give you a little bit more in-depth information about that. But for example, if you are applying as an artist, you want to make sure the grant is benefiting you as an artist, and it's not meant to fund you to teach others, for example, like I've mentioned before or earlier. You want to make sure your application is signed. It's a typed signature in the grant application for artists. You want to make sure that, when you're writing your grant application, keep in mind that the grant reviewers can only look at your grant application. They can't consider any additional materials that you might mention in your narrative. For example, a website. So let's say you are applying because you want to work with a mentor for a series of, for a mentorship. And you write in your grant application, here's my mentor's website, so you can see who they are and what they do. The grant reviewers can't actually leave your application and go look at that mentor's website. Instead, what you'll need to do is include in your application an artistic resume for that mentor that you wish to work with, and information from the website that you want them to know. So you will include in your narrative maybe more information about that mentor. You can include a screenshot of the website that you want them to see, uploading that into the application to make it part of the application. And if this is, I mean, if you have questions about any of this, let me know. Let's see. You want to make sure you submit your grant application on time. You have until 11:59 p.m. on the deadline date. So let's say if you are working on a grant application, because you're going to apply on February 1st, on February 1st until 11:59 p.m., you can hit that submit button for your application. However, if you hit the submit button and you, for some reason, have missed one of the required questions in the application, it won't allow you to submit your application. It will say you have an unanswered question. So you then have to go back into the application and find where that question is. And I would just fear that if you wait till the last minute and you have to go back and answer a question, that you may miss that deadline of 11:59 p.m. And I would hate for that to happen. So you've put a lot of time into your application. You just want to make sure that you are submitting your application on time. All right, obviously, also we ask for additional information to be included with your application. And this will be clear once you're looking at the application itself. You'll see there's spots in the application for you to upload, for example, your artistic resume and your work samples. You do need to include all of these extra requirements as attachments with your application. All right, next slide. Let's talk about some dates and deadlines and earliest start dates and end dates and things like that. Each of these tables are similar, but they may have slight different dates. These tables are in all of our grant guidelines. So if you want to go back and reference the tables and these dates that I'm talking about, just open up the grant guidelines and you'll find the exact dates that I'm talking about specific to that grant program. But let's just look at this first grant. The first table column is titled Technical Assistance Deadline. Remember earlier when I told you that I'm available to review a draft of your grant application before you submit it? That's what this means, their technical assistant deadline. If you request, so as an example, let's say you're going to apply for October 1st deadline. You'll see that on that row, October 1st technical assistance deadline is September 20th. So if you ask me to review your grant application by September 20th, 100% you're guaranteed I will review your draft of your application and have feedback for you. And definitely in time for you to submit your application by October 1st. After September 20th, I do still make myself available to review drafts of applications. So don't hesitate to still request a review. It just means that I may have less and less time as we get closer to the deadline to review an application and get feedback back to you in time for you to update your application. So that's why we have the deadline date. But please, if it is after the deadline date, don't feel like you can still request a review and I'll let you know if I'm available. The grant deadline date is just what it is. You do have to submit your grant application on the deadline date by that 11:59 p.m. timeframe. The final approved by date and time, this is when you'll hear back from us, whether your grant application is funded. We do invite you to the grant review. We send out an invitation letting you know when your application will be reviewed. And on that evening, you will find out if your application is funded or if it's been recommended for funding. So you'll know by this date whether or not your application was approved or denied. The earliest start date. So this is the date. This date is also very important to keep in mind when you're working on an application. This is the date that you can start the grant project that you're applying for. If you mention in your application that you've already started a project, it will be ineligible. I'll just throw that out there. You do want to make sure that you wait, that your project doesn't start until after this earliest start date. So if you're applying for an application by October 1st, your earliest start date is January 15th of 2025, for example. If you apply February 1st, your earliest start date is May 15th of 2025. And if you apply April 1st, your earliest start date for your project will be July 15th of 2025. Now, the last column is the latest end date that your project can be completed. So you do have to complete your grant project within this time frame, and it's June 30th of 2026. That's the furthest date that we can allow a grant project to occur. So if you apply October 1st, you can work on a grant project between January 15th of 2025 till June 30th of 2026. If you apply April 1st, you can work on a grant project between the dates of July 15th of 2025 and June 30th of 2026. So it gives you approximately a year or more to complete a grant project. And this is for the Arts and Cultural Heritage Grant. If you're applying for a mid-career artist grant, it's very similar, but you may see some slight differences. And if you apply for the Essential Artist Award, you do have a year to apply. So you apply March 1st. Your earliest start date is July 1st of 2025, and the latest end date is July 1st of 2026. All right, what's next? Grant amounts for individuals. Okay, let's get into a little bit more about the grant applications itself. So we've got a $600 resiliency grant for artists. We have a $2,000 Arts and Cultural Heritage individual artist grant. This grant requires you to have an outcome evaluation and an open to the public component is required. If you need a space for an open to the public event, our office space, as I mentioned, the gallery it's possible that is available. There is a possibility. We do also allow online events. We have seen artists who create artistic portfolios that they share on their website or their social media pages, or maybe a video creation of your project that can be shared with the public is a possibility as an event. We have a $3,600 mid-career artist grant. And then we have a $9,000 Essential Artist Award. There is no match requirement for artists who are applying for individual artist grants. What that means is you do not have to put any of your personal funds towards the grant project. It's possible if your grant total expenses are more than what the grant funding that's available, that you would be contributing some of your own funds, but it's not required. Your grant application can be for the grant amount you're requesting. Another thing I would just note too, that Arts and Cultural Heritage grants, the legacy dollars, they are funding that does have to stay within the state of Minnesota. So you cannot travel outside the state of Minnesota, for example, with the Arts and Cultural Heritage grant. McKnight funded grants, you can travel anywhere in the world. So if your project that you're considering does take you outside of the state of Minnesota, then the McKnight funded grant is the grant that I would probably be a better fit for your project. Okay, grant review criteria. I did say I was going to dive in a little bit more to this. So this is what your application will be scored on when you're applying for a grant with the East Central Regional Arts Council. If you're applying for an Arts and Cultural Heritage grant, that's the $2,000 grant, your grant will be scored up to 36 points possible. You can get up to 10 points for artistic merit and quality, up to 10 points for organizational ability, up to 10 points for community need for the project, and up to 6 points for equity and inclusion for underrepresented. Let's just dive a little deeper into each of those criteria. So artistic merit and quality. When a reviewer is looking at your application, these are the questions that they're asking themselves. Does this proposal, meaning your application, instill the arts into the community and public life? How does this proposal provide a high-quality arts experience? How does this proposal give access to Region 7E quality arts experience? How does this proposal help to develop knowledge, skills, and understanding of the arts? So you as an artist, are you explaining in your application narrative how you will be developing your skills as an artist, how you will be developing additional knowledge about your arts, your chosen art form, or your understanding of your art form? They'll be looking at your artistic resume and work samples to substantiate the artistic merit and quality of your project. So they will do your artistic work samples match the project that you're submitting? If they don't, are you explaining why they don't? Does your artistic resume meet the artistic merit and quality of the project that you're proposing? Does the project expand the artist's artistic capabilities and or their experience with the audience? These are things that you can keep in mind as you're working on your application narrative and answering these questions in the application, that this is one of the pieces that you will be scored on. Okay, organizational ability, up to 10 points for organizational ability. Reviewers will be asking themselves, does your application explain the planning process for your project? And is that planning process appropriate for the project? They'll be looking at your budget. Is it feasible? Does it make sense for the project that you're proposing? They are looking at your marketing and publicity plan for your open to the public event. Is it appropriate for the project? And does it make sense for the project and the applicant's abilities? They're looking at your outcomes and outcome evaluation plan. And is that appropriate for the project? Does it make sense? And is the evaluation included as an expense in your project budget? If you're putting outcomes together for your public event, most likely it will take you time to read through. Maybe you're surveying your audience at your art opening, and you'll be afterwards then reading through those surveys. So you'll have an expense for printing the surveys. You'll have an expense. Maybe you have to buy pens or pencils. Maybe you're going to electronically survey your audience through SurveyMonkey, and there's a subscription fee that you'll need in order to do that. And that can be part of your project expense. Maybe there's time that you're going to be putting into reading through all of those surveys afterwards and compiling that information. So that's what we mean by, do you have a budget for the outcome evaluation plan? If you have had grants with us in the past, they're also looking at your past grant history. They know if your past grants were successful and if your final reports were submitted on time, and if you use the funding credit line during your events and things like that. So they will have access to that when they're looking at future grant applications. If you're a new applicant, they won't, you obviously don't have a past grant history, and that won't be part of the review. So you're not an organization, so we won't worry about this last one. Okay, so 10 points for community demand or need for the grant program. So they are looking at your project and thinking of how you may have defined who your community you're serving is. Who is your audience for the art that you're creating and for your event? They're looking at if your application demonstrates community involvement or support for the project. They're looking at if your project is, okay, sorry, I'm just getting off. Will the applicant be able to market the project effectively to the community served? How does the project meet the artist's need of the applicant? And will the project meet the artistic needs of the defined community? How does the budget demonstrate financial need? So these are some of the questions they'll ask them. The reviewers ask themselves when they're reading your application. So something to consider when you keep in mind while you're working on your answering those questions. Up to 6 points for equity and inclusion for grant projects or programs in the community served. So for this particular criteria, the applicant should describe how the project identifies, proactively addresses barriers to engage historically marginalized or targeted or underserved people and identities that may otherwise have limited access to your proposed activity. Will your audience or will your project incorporate somehow Indigenous people or people of color, or Native Americans, African American, Middle Eastern, refugees, economically disadvantaged individuals, people with disabilities, LGBTQIA? Does the applicant explain how they are positioned to engage with or support these underrepresented communities that they're describing? What ways has the applicant made attempts to be more equitable and inclusive in their project or their event? Has the applicant, if the applicant is an underrepresented artist, or if you identify with the list above, or if you primarily serve those people identified above, what are the unique ways in which they will engage or you will engage with members of the community who are not yet connected to your work? So these grant review criteria are included in the grant guidelines. That's one of the items that I would definitely say pay close attention to when you're reviewing those grant guidelines before you apply for a grant with us. If there's a financial cost for participant your project, maybe you want to consider how you're making that cost. Is the cost a barrier? So maybe you will make your events more accessible to to people who may have a barrier to enter your event. So that might be an example of ticket discounts or scholarships or waived membership dues or transportation reimbursements, things like that you can include as part of your project. Again, questions that you might have about this, you're welcome to reach out to me. All right, if you're applying for a McKnight funded grant, which is the Mid-Career Artist Grant or the Essential Artist Award, your grant application can have up to a total of 60 points possible. And that points are based on your artwork samples, the project, and your artistic resume. So a little bit more about each. You can receive up to 30 points for your artwork samples that you're including with your grant application. So grant reviewers are considering, do the work samples substantiate the artistic merit and quality of the project? Are the work samples 4 years old or less? And if they're not, was information included in your application why the work samples are older than 4 years old? Are the work samples an accurate representation of the project that you're presenting? So your work samples, if you are a visual artist, for example, an oil painter perhaps, your work samples that you're submitting with your application would be oil paintings that you've created in the past. Or if you're a potter, you would be submitting photos of your pottery. Or if you are a writer, you will be submitting pages of your written work that you have as a work sample. For the quality of the proposed project, up to 20 points are available so they're looking at, does the project describe how the artist will expand your skills as an artist? What is it about this project that is going to advance your skills as an artist? Will the project assist the artist in their career as an individual artist? Is there something about this project that will help you to launch your career to the next level? Does the artist include sufficient details about the project to inform the reviewers? So making sure you're including as much information about what it is this grant project will include with the application so reviewers understand exactly what you'll be doing from beginning to end of the project is important to keep in mind and include in your application narrative. Your artistic resume, you can get up to 10 points for your artistic resume. So things that the reviewers are looking at is your artistic resume complete? Does the artistic resume include the artist's experience as it pertains to the planned project? So if the project you're proposing, they want to make sure that you have the ability to complete the project successfully. So does your artistic resume show that? Does the planned project align with the artist's resume and experience level? Again, making sure that the project is one that your artistic resume shows that you're able to complete successfully. Okay, application information. Things to know about the application. It is the first impression that the reviewers have of your project. So most likely the grant reviewers, they've never heard of you. They may not even be familiar with your particular art form if they are not. So if you're a musician applying as a project, and there's terminology you're including with your application that is specific to your art form, make sure in your narrative that you're explaining some of those things to the reviewers so they understand exactly what it is that your project will include. Make sure that you're answering all of the required questions in the application. The application itself, if the question has an asterisk, that means it's a required application question. So you want to completely answer those questions. And when I say completely answer those questions, just make sure you're answering everything. Don't feel like you have to include additional information that we're not requesting. And some of the questions, maybe your answer will be just a few sentences, and some of the questions, maybe your answer will be a few paragraphs. It just depends on the questions in the application, which you can see those questions in advance if you'd like, and I'll show you where you can see those on our website. Okay, you want to make sure that your project starts after the earliest start date allowable. I mentioned this before that there is an earliest start date. So the earliest start date on that date is when you can start purchasing supplies for your project. You can spend any of the grant money. You can contract with mentors. You can sign up for the class that you're about to take. You can purchase equipment on that start date. You can do all of the things that you're proposing in your project starting on that start date. if your application, like I mentioned before, if you mentioned in your application that your project has already started, unfortunately, that would make it an ineligible grant for this particular grant period. So it is something to consider of the timelines and when a good time to apply is, if making sure that it fits into those start and end dates. All right, the narrative section in our application, you want to be clear about what it is you're proposing to do, what activities exactly will happen during the project period. Maybe you're going to do that with by explaining the schedule of events that will happen. Beginning on the start date of your project, you're going to purchase your supplies, and then you plan on renting studio space, and then you're going to spend so many hours creating maybe a new series of paintings, and then that series of paintings you're going to have professionally photographed, and then those professional photographs you're going to share to your social media pages, and or maybe you're going to create a video about your process, and you're going to show how you create pottery on your potter's wheel, or there's so many projects that could be possible, but just make sure that in your application the reviewers understand what it is that your project consists of. You want to make sure you're answering all of the application questions, which I think we've already talked about that. Make sure you're explaining how the project impacts you as an artist. Where are you now as an artist when you're filling out this application, and with the project that you're applying for grant funds? How do you feel that will advance you as an artist, or how do you feel your skills will improve because of this grant project? So that is something you can include in your narrative. Why is this project important to you as an artist? Those are all things that our reviewers want to hear about. Make sure your narrative tells the same story as the budget. What we mean by this is, in the grant application, we have a budget template where you're sharing the numbers of, for example, you're going to have maybe an amount that you're going to, for your supplies and materials. Maybe there's an amount that will pay you for your time to work on your project specifically. Maybe there's rental fees for your art show because you're going to have it in a space that there's a rental fee. There could be all sorts of different expenses, right? So you're giving us the numbers, the totals for your expenses in your budget template. Well, make sure in your application that you're explaining each of those narrative items in a narrative budget section. So if you're paying yourself for your time as an artist, tell us in your narrative how many hours and what you'll be paying yourself per hour. If you're purchasing supplies, maybe you're going to spend $300 on supplies. Tell us in your narrative what it is, the supplies that you're going to purchase. Is it, maybe it's 10 tubes of paint and 10 canvases and new brushes, or maybe it's clay, or maybe it's a writing app that's going to help you focus on writing your next book. Excuse me, I've been talking enough that I need to take a sip of water. If you're purchasing equipment and you put equipment expenses in your budget, but you didn't tell us anything about the equipment and why you need it as part of your project narrative, you may receive less points for your grant application, because the reviewers won't know why you need the equipment and why you have that amount in your budget. They may feel that your project isn't fundable because they don't know that information. So something to keep in mind again in the narrative section. If you're applying for an arts and cultural heritage grant, make sure you have that outcome evaluation plan is required. The application itself has questions to ask you about your outcome evaluations. But you want to also then include outcome evaluation expenses, as I've mentioned, in your budget. Equipment, if you are purchasing equipment as part of your project, that is totally okay. If you need the equipment to have a successful project, you can include an equipment as part of your grant project. But you do have to have a project attached to that equipment. You cannot apply for a grant with us and only purchase equipment. That is not an eligible project. So if you are, for example, let's say you are purchasing a new kiln as part of your project, what is the project? Like maybe your project includes, then you have to test the kiln. You need to find out if your glazes, how the kiln, maybe cone firing tests that you're going to perform with your new kiln. You're going to create a series of new pottery pieces to fire in the kiln. That's a project. You want to make it a project along with purchasing your new kiln or whatever your piece of equipment may be. Keep in mind that you will report on all of the results of your project in your final report. So you're applying for a grant with it. You work on your application. If your project is funded, you will complete your project maybe within a year's time. And then at the end of once the project is completed, then you will come back to us and report in your final report that you submit to ECRAC about the successes or failures or all of the information we ask for in our final report. So that is something else to know about when you apply for a grant with us. All right, let's talk some more about the budget. What can your grant funds help you with? Some allowable expenses that you can include in your grant application include mentor costs to pay for a mentor. It can pay for workshops or classes. It can pay for transportation to and from an arts event, or maybe your art project takes you through Minnesota. Maybe it takes you further than that. Publicity, if you're having an event, you're going to have to need to pay for publicity or maybe newspaper ads or printing flyers or posters or invitations. Rental fees, it can pay for supplies and materials. It can pay for printing and postage. Maybe if you are having an event, you're going to send out invitations, so you'll need postage for that. There's others things that maybe you'll have to pay royalty fees if you're maybe a musician and you're creating new music and there's royalty fees included. So those are some, maybe there's an insurance expense. Maybe you need assistance with internet expenses because you're going to be, some of your project is based online. So some of that can be included as allowable expenses for your project. Our grant budgets are double entry, is a double entry accounting system. So your expenses for the project, you have to have an equal income for the project. So what that means is, let's say your total project expenses are $2,000. That includes all of your supplies and materials and your workshop costs, right? Your income then has to also be $2,000. So where is that income coming from? Well, hopefully it's coming from a grant with us. So you are getting a grant for $2,000, that's your income. If, for example, your total project expenses are $3,000, well, your grant amount can be up to $2,000, let's say. Where's the additional $1,000 coming from? Sometimes it's from earned income during the project, from maybe the sale of a piece of artwork, or maybe there's ticket sales for an event that you're hosting as part of your project. It can be other grants and contributions. It can be cash on hand, which is just cash or money that you have personally that you'll contribute to the project to meet those total expenses. Of course, the grant amount. One thing to also note is if you are applying for a grant from the Minnesota State Arts Board, because they're a separate organization from us, you cannot apply for the same grant with ECRAC, with East Central Regional Arts Council, and combine those grants together. So just note that. Let's see. This is what the project budget template will look like with your application. So this is a separate document that you download to your computer, and you will fill in these columns. So for example, the grant fund column, this is the column that will add up and total the grant amount that you're requesting. So if you're requesting $2,000 in grant funds, let's say you have $1,000 for your time on the project, which is line item number 2. And you've got then another $1,000 for supplies and materials, which is $6,000. You'll have $1,000 under each of those line items to total $2,000 in the grant funds. The local match column, that's the column that's available for you to fill out any match that you're contributing to the project. So let's go back to my $3,000 example. Where is that? Maybe it's an additional $1,000 for rental fees and equipment that you're going to purchase as part of the project, but you're going to personally purchase that as part of the grant because the grant amounts there's not enough funding to pay for $3,000. So your $1,000 contribution will be under local match in the equipment line item number 5. And your total project expenses then will be in the totals column for each line item to equal $3,000. And then on the project income table at the bottom of this form, you'll have your cash on hand will be $1,000 from yourself personally that you're contributing to the project. And then the second to the last line there under ECRAC grant request is $2,000 that you're requesting for your grant. So your income for the project then is $3,000, which will equal then your budget of $3,000, your total expenses. If you are working on this template and it does not make any sense, I'm happy to help you with it. I totally get it. So I've helped many artists work through the budget on this for the budget template. So once you have this filled out, then you upload your completed budget template back into the application. And there's space where you'll upload this in the application. All right, some additional materials. These are some of the other things that we require you to upload into your application. So before you even open an application, this is something you can start working on. You need to have an artistic resume for yourself as an artist. If you don't have an artistic resume, I do have an example of what an artistic resume looks like on our website. I'll show you where you can find that. I think actually the next page, I'm going to be talking about what things that go in an artistic resume. If you're working with a mentor or you're taking a class, you want to have an artistic resume for that mentor or the teacher of that class that you'll be attending. Work samples from your particular art form. So if you are a visual artist, you're a painter, for example, you will be uploading, you can have up to 10 work samples as a visual artist. If you're a writer, you can have up to 10 pages of writing samples. If you're a musician or theater, or you have a recording of some of your art form, you can have up to 6 minutes total. And in the application, we provide 3 separate spots for you to have video space or music to be uploaded. If you're a visual artist and up to 10 work samples, you have 1 spot in the application. You combine all your work samples into a 10-page document, 1 work sample per page, and you upload that into the upload space available in the work samples section of the application. If you have any questions about work samples, maybe you're multidisciplinary and you have a combination of different work samples, feel free to reach out and I can let you know what the limits to those work samples are. You do not want to submit more than the allowable work samples that the application requests. There is a note that it is possible supplying more than we are asking for can make your project ineligible. The workshop or class information, if you happen to be attending a class, make sure you're including the workshop information, like who the artist is, what it is that you'll be learning in that class, when the dates for the class, all of that. So only if you're attending a workshop, you would include that. Any other supporting materials, such as cost estimates for supplies and materials. So if you are purchasing a list of supplies, what I've seen from other applicants, maybe you have a Dick Blick shopping cart of all the supplies that you would be purchasing. You can take a screenshot of that and upload it into your application, or an Amazon shopping cart or Northern Clay Pottery shopping cart that you can screenshot and upload into the application. And that would show all of the materials that you'll be purchasing and the exact cost of each material. Supporting materials such as, so if you are purchasing equipment as part of your project, if the equipment is more than $500, you are required to submit 3 separate price quotes for that equipment. And it should come from 3 separate locations. Hopefully one vendor would be a Minnesota-based vendor as well. So that's what you want to include with your application. There's also then, if you're purchasing equipment, you want to make sure you're including an equipment that you will not sell the equipment. So you're certifying a letter. I have an example on our website of what that will look like too. And there'll be a question or spot in the application for that. If you're not purchasing equipment, you don't need to upload any of this, of course. All right, so artistic resume. I have this on our website too, so I'm not going to spend too much time what goes into artistic resume, but for example, we are looking for maybe an artist statement to be included, education and training that you might have. Doesn't require that you have college education as a trained artist. It can be self-taught, but maybe you've just taken some classes. Maybe you've learned from your family members. That is okay, and you can include that in your artistic resume. If you have any employment that pertains to your artistic art form, you can include that. If you've done any publications or readings or exhibitions, or you've been part of certain performances, this is discipline appropriate that you'll include in your application. If you've received any awards or in collections, maybe you've worked with a mentor in the past, you can put that on your resume. Maybe you have work that's been commissioned. Maybe you've participated in a panel or a committee, or you're on a board. So any of that can be included in an artistic resume. If you don't have an artistic resume, if you're not comfortable with this artistic resume format, if it's not, maybe there is feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to look at an artistic resume or help you with any questions you might have around artistic resumes if needed. Okay, so work samples. As you are selecting your work samples for your application, you do want to make sure that those work samples are meet the criteria of your project, and choose your best work samples. It is important that the samples you submit represent the work to its best advantage. So put your strongest work samples first. In general, our grant reviewers are not looking for a range in abilities. They are looking for a cohesive vision for your grant project. So if you are an artist who has many artistic disciplines that you practice, but maybe you are a musician and a painter, but your grant project you're applying for has to do with your visual art, only include visual art work samples. Don't add any of your musician work samples, because that wouldn't make sense for the project that you're applying for. Make sure in your application you are including the details on the types of work samples that you're including, and that you are only including the allowable type of work sample for your art form. There is in the application, the instructions are right there. So they'll tell you based on your art discipline, what type of work samples you can include. Okay, that sums up the application portion of our workshop here. So once you have all of your application completed, as I mentioned before, I'm available to review a draft of your application if you'd like to request that. It's not required, of course, you don't have to, but I am available and can review and give you feedback on your application before you hit that submit. Once you submit your application, I should let you know too, if you submit your application accidentally, maybe you push that submit button too early, and you want to make changes to your application, you can reach out to me. I can unsubmit an application so you can have it back and make any adjustments or updates that you'd like to your application. Just make sure that you're resubmitting it before the grant deadline date. So once that application is submitted, at that point, I become a monitor of your proposal, and I ensure that it's fundable. So I work with our grant panelist and board members to review each of the applications, and I assist them with the application process. We can't accept anything after that deadline date. So if the deadline date is passed and you reach out and you realize maybe you forgot to add the correct upload to your application, unfortunately, after that deadline date, I cannot help you with any changes to the application. At that point, what I will do is invite you to the grant review. I'll let you know when your application will be reviewed. You find out that night whether it'll be funded or recommended for funding. And you'll find out what your score is for your application. If your project happens to not be funded, you can request to see the evaluations of your application. So each of the panel members who are reading your application, they score your application, and they leave comments based on the criteria of your project. So you are able to request that the review, and I can share with you what the reviewers had to say and the comments that they make. They always recommend that artists reapply, as I mentioned, so you can have that feedback and reapply and hopefully get funded the second time around. If your project is approved, at that point, what happens is we put together a grant contract and a request for payment form, and we email that to you. It is a PDF document that with electronic signatures. You have 45 days to accept the grant award and return those documents back to us. We meet with you and do a grant management training. So at that point, you have a grant with us, and we just sort of walk you through things to keep in mind throughout the grant project. We talk about if you have an open to the public event, we make sure that you know that you do have to, there's a funding credit line and logos that you have to include in all of your publicity for your project, or anytime you're promoting your project, you need to use the funding credit line. And I'll show you an example of that here in just a little bit, what that might look like. If there's changes that are needed to your project, we're available to work with you through a change request. You can make updates to a project. You're working on this grant application now, and you don't know for months whether or not it's going to be funded. And then it's maybe another month before you can even start the project because your start date is still a ways away. There are definitely things that could come up that would require a change to the project. And we do have a process in place where you can request a change to a grant application because we know that things could happen that require a change. What else? Am I missing anything here? You will have that final report again too at the end of the project. So throughout the grant period, you are required to track all of the expenses for your budget that you submitted with your application. And you have to keep all of your grant related materials for at least 3 years after a grant project has been accepted. Okay, we made it to the one of the last slides. We're getting to the end. What are some things to remind you of? Okay, so you can find all of our grant materials on our website. There is a grant portal where you can get into the grant application when the deadline is coming up. I am available to assist with grant questions or reviewing a draft of your application. Keep in mind those timelines that I mentioned, start dates, end dates, application deadline dates. If you are interested in reviewing past grant applications that we have here in the office, and you would like to read through some of those, you can make an appointment, give us a call, and you can come into the office. Those are available here in the office as hard copies. Again, please reach out if you have questions. I'm happy to answer questions that you might have. This is my contact information. Grantinfo@ecrac.org is my email address. You can also email our executive director, Mary Minnick Daniels. She is at director@ecrac.org. Our website is www.ecrac.org. We have a Facebook page, the East Central Minnesota Regional Arts Council. There is 2 staff members here currently. So if you are interested in coming into our office, I usually do advise giving us a call or making an appointment first before you come in, just to make sure that we are here and will be available in the office for you. All right, here's an example of that funding credit line that I mentioned earlier. So this activity is made possible with funds provided by the McKnight Foundation and also by the voters of Minnesota, thanks to legislative appropriations from both the General Fund and the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. And we have all 3 of the funding logos here, and #ArtsLegacy, #ECRAC. Okay, let's get out of that slideshow. And now I want to take you to our website. This is the website for the East Central Regional Arts Council. This is our homepage currently. I will occasionally change up the artwork that's here being featured. This is artwork piece by a local artist, Carol Burson, on our homepage right now. The Image Art Show I mentioned earlier. If you are interested in entering the Image Art Show, we have this homepage will change. But for now, it is talking about the upcoming 2024 Image Art Show. You can always, under the Art and Community tab, get to our art show page. If you open that, you'll see past art shows that we've hosted. Last year's Image Art Show is right here, 2023. This was our People's Choice winner, People's Choice artwork. Talks about the artwork, the Excellence Awards, the People's Choice Award winners. If you scroll to the bottom, there are videos that we created of the artwork that was part of the show. There's the show booklet. Back to the top here, let's go back up. Under Art and Community, we also have an ECRAC events calendar. So if you're interested in arts events that are happening in our region, You can find that here. If you have an event as an artist that's happening, you can add your art event to our calendar. It's a free way to advertise your arts event. You just fill in this information here and hit the submit button, and we'll have your event in our arts calendar. Other news, if you ever want to see past newsletters, they are always posted on our news page. This resources page, this is the page I have mentioned earlier, where you can see these are all Region 70 arts organizations or artist resources website pages. So if you know of an arts resource page that should be added, let me know. I'm happy to add new arts websites here. Or if you click on one and it doesn't work anymore, please let me know that too. I always want to keep these as up to date as possible. We have arts infos across the state of Minnesota as well. So not just in our region, but also across the state and beyond. So lots of information on our resource page. And this is all under the Arts and Community tab. If you are wanting to look specifically at grant programs, I would say go under the Grants Available tab and then click on the individual artist pages. So here's where you'll see each of the separate grant programs that ECRAC offers. The Arts and Cultural Heritage Grant for $2,000, the Essential Artist Award for $9,000, the Mid-Career Artist Grant for $3,600, that Resiliency Grant, that's $600, and then the scholarship. If you click on any of these grant programs, it'll take you to that website page where you'll find out a little bit more about that specific grant program. I would also say pay close attention to this quick summary page. This quick summary, you'll find the deadline dates for when you can apply. You'll find the grant amount available. You will find a PDF of the grant guidelines here. So if you click on this, it will open up the grant guidelines that you can review. I also have a copy of the application questions as a PDF. This is not the application. It is just a copy of the questions. So you can see what those grant questions are in advance before you dive into the grant portal. I have a copy of the budget template available on this page. I have an example of the artistic resumes that you can review if you need assistance putting together an artistic resume. Also, if you are purchasing equipment, this is a copy or an example of the equipment use plan that you must submit with your application if you're purchasing equipment. So that is also here on this page. There's a grant portal tutorial. If you are new to the grant portal and if you haven't set up a grant login, that is just a quick tutorial to walk you through the process. Access the grant portal. So under Manage My Grant, this is the next tab to help you through the grant process here. Access the grant portal. If you open this, this will bring you to the grant portal. I'll just click on this. If you've never had a grant with us before and you are creating your portal, you'll just hit this Create a New Account button, and it brings you into a section where you'll answer some questions. And it does seem like it's meant for organizations, but you'll notice under organization name here, it says enter last name if you are an individual artist. So your last name will be your organization name. If you don't have an EIN number because you are an artist, not an organization. So you'll notice here it says enter NA if you're applying as an individual artist. So it does walk you through some of those questions that might seem a little bit odd as an individual rather than an organization. So once you get, then you these all filled out, you'll hit the next and it brings you into the series of questions to set up your login. Now let's go back to our website under Manage My Grant. This is where you'll find some other information once you have a grant with us about your final report, frequently asked questions. If you have a change request, like I mentioned, this page walks you through how to submit a change request to us. If you are advertising for your event, there's a press kit page here that tells you the different funding credit lines that we have available. You have access to the logos that you'll be required to include with your funding credit line. At the very bottom, if you're putting out a press release for your project, it tells you what a press release is. It tells you how you can write one. I even have a list of local newspaper editor email addresses that you can email your press releases to throughout the region. I also have put together the logo and funding credit line. Depending on which grant you have, you can copy and paste this into your publicity to assist you with including that funding credit line and logos. Let's get back to the top here. Under Manage My Grant, the last item I'll show you is the Thank Your Legislators page. If you're receiving grants from the Legacy Fund, the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, we do want grantees to reach out to their local representatives and say thank you for this fund. They are the ones who will help us continue this funding into the future. And so we always like to say thank you to them and invite them to your grant event if you'd like. So this talks about the legacy dollars. It shares information about an example sample letter, thank you letter. It has more information from the Minnesota Citizens for the Arts, who are a big part of the legacy funds and advocating for the arts. So all of that information can be found on our website. And I think that's everything I have for you. I may have forgotten something. There may be a project that you listen to this grant workshop and you're like, wait, she didn't answer that question that I had. Well, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to talk about grant ideas and questions that you might have. Thank you for joining me. If you've made it this far, you're doing really great. Again, my contact information can be found on our website at ECRAC.org. My email is grantinfo@ECRAC.org. And happy art making. And I'm really glad you're here. Bye for now.